What's up, y'all? It's your boy Kev on stage, and it's time for Dear Kev on Stage. Today's question, I'm just going to paraphrase because I'm driving and I want to keep my eyes on the road so I can keep myself alive. Okay, the question basically reads, Dear Kev on Stage, what do I do? The girl I fell in love with is agnostic. I didn't know she was agnostic when we fell in love. We were engaged, but I threw it off because, her being agnostic bothered me. I'm a full-fledged Christian. She doesn't prevent me from being a Christian, and I don't try to force her to be a Christian. She used to go to church, but then she became agnostic. What do I do? Do I marry her and hope that she changes, or do I call the whole thing off? Now, and he also said, I know all about being unequally yoked. So, for those of you who didn't know, because I didn't know exactly what agnostic meant, there's an atheist. He also said, let me remember this part. If she was an atheist, that would be simple. I could cut her off, but she's not. She's agnostic. So the difference for you guys who didn't know, because I didn't know, an atheist is a person who doesn't believe in God. They believe there is no God. A theist, which Christians are, is a person who believes there is a God. An agnostic person believes that there's not enough information to say there is or isn't a God. So let's just say they neither don't believe or do believe. They'll just say, maybe, maybe not. So what should you do? Now, here's the thing. Your relationship is actually more common than you would think. There's often people of different religious backgrounds who get married. My Zay's best friend Camden, his mom is Catholic and his dad is Jewish. So there's two, wholly different relationships. My Aunt Sadie is a devout Jehovah's Witness, and my Uncle Ed is nothing. Uncle Ed don't go to church, don't go to Kingdom Hall, none of that stuff. And Uncle Ed and Aunt Sadie have been married for probably over 30 years. The Bible says, how can two walk together unless they agree? The problem is, if you're a strong Christian and she neither believes or doesn't believe, it tends to cause friction, right? And often, a lot of times in the black church, the woman is saved and the husband isn't saved. Have you noticed there's like 70 to 75% more women in the church than men? And a lot of times they are married, their husbands just don't come to church. So it's really not that uncommon. I can't tell you whether to marry her or not, because that's up to you and that's your decision. But I can tell you what may or may not happen. You can end up like Uncle Ed and Aunt Sadie. She's going to be agnostic forever, and you just separate that, part of her from you. Or you can be like another friend of mine who was saved and her husband wasn't saved, and she just prayed for him, always tried to get in church, never could do it. And then they just went their separate ways because they could never get on that common ground. Here's another thing. The level of your religion is going to help determine whether you should or shouldn't move forward with that relationship. Because if you're just like not you, but anybody in general, if you're just like a so-so person, it's easier to be with somebody who's whatever, because you're not fully into it. But when you're devout something, you believe in everything, you're going to be, I'm the head of my household, my wife should be saved, my children should be saved. That's going to be another thing. If you guys have kids together, do you want them to go to church? Who's going to take them to church? Does she not want them to go to church, or does she not care? Again, in the black church, you often see women married and their husbands aren't there, and the kids go to church and they're raised that way. So it just depends. Now, one of the questions you asked is, do I marry her and hope she changes? I have some advice about that. You should never marry someone expecting them to change, and you should never marry someone expecting them to stay the same. You can't marry her and hope she changes and then get mad if she doesn't, because she was already like that before you got married. It's unfair to her and to you to be like, I'll marry you, but in 2 or 3 years you better be Christian or whatever, because that's unfair. You can't expect them to do it knowing that they aren't like that. Now, at the same point, you could marry her and love her, and your love of Christ can lead her to Christ. That very well could happen, and she could become completely devout. My pastor and his wife both were unsaved when they got married. Then he got saved. No. Then she got saved and brought him to Christ. And then she backslid, and he in turn brought her back to Christ. And that all happened in the first 10 years of their marriage. So like I said, you just never know what can or cannot happen. I believe love and your true love will have more of an effect on her than anything else, Now, if you leave her because she's agnostic, can you love her to Christ? Can your love lead her to Christ? Probably not, because the Christian she knows was like, turned on her. You know what I mean? So there's a lot of things that you have to think about before you make a decision. I'm sorry, I can't answer specifically for you, because you have to decide what you're willing to risk, what's most important to you. But just know all the things that I said. And while we're talking about this, I try to do as many Dear Kev on stages with my wife. I just can't do them all the time because Zay's in school and we're, working on JoJo. We have him in homeschool working on his speech and all that type of stuff. So it's not always feasible. I'm doing my take. She's got her take. So we're doing a lot of different stuff. So I'll do as much as I can, but I won't always be able to. All right. You guys have a great day.